Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is the Ukraine War news update, the first part thereof for the 13th of August 2025. Let's start with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, as per usual. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them linked in the description below. 890 personnel lost is below the 1,000 threshold we often talk about. And I think August 2025 is the first time a monthly average, although we're not obviously finished in August, has fallen below 1,000 a day. So that is interesting. And that's the first time that's happened, possibly since August 2024, first time in a year. That tells us something about the front line. Now, there were claims that there have been some of the defenses from the Ukrainians that don't worry too much about the Pokrovsk area. You know, it is just a small number of DRG special forces people getting behind the lines. It's all right type thing. When I did that breakthrough video, there were some claims that the Russians have taken some huge losses there, and one of you was questioning how can they be taking huge losses when the numbers are below 1,000 fairly consistently at the moment. And that is my synopsis, is that if that is indeed true, that they're not just lying about the Russians taking huge losses. I think the Russians are taking huge losses in Pokrovsk, and they have been having success. I think all of Russia's successes come at huge cost to them in terms of personnel, but they are just not pushing in that many places. There are claims that they are ramping up for an attack in Zaporizhia. There are claims that they are ramping up for further pushes in Pokrovsk, Donetsk areas. But up and down the front line, it isn't as crazy as it has been previously. They're being pushed back somewhat in Sumy. Claims that actually Russians are being pushed back in Liman as well. We'll talk about that in a little while. So I think it can be true that both the overall numbers are lower than normal, but that the Russians are also taking heavy casualties in certain places. It's just the way that they operate. Generally, they throw a lot of people at the areas that they suspect a weakness or hope that there will be a weakness in the uh, under the objective that they will take some land. Um, you know, square kilometers per X amount of people is a calculation they are willing to make. So yeah, I think the numbers have dropped, but there will be certain hot points that will involve the Russians taking some heavy losses, no doubt. One single tank, 8 troop-carrying AFVs, 23 artillery systems. So all of those either marginally or somewhat below the daily average, or very much below the daily average in terms of tanks. One multiple launch rocket system, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. And that's pretty good there. I don't think I've seen an Andrew Perpetua loss list. 46 vehicles and fuel tanks. That's a very low number in that category. Well below what we're used to. We're used to more like 146, let alone 46. So certainly some lower numbers from the Russians, or in terms of Russian losses. Now we are going to look at a couple of loss statistics. One coming from something which is verifiable, and I think this is your what's it terminus ad quiem or whatever it is in historical terms. It's your earliest possible date. If something happens, right, and you're a historian, you're like, well, it couldn't have happened before this because this king was in place, and we know that he existed then. So this event couldn't have happened before then, and it couldn't have happened after then. And so you have these two benchmark dates that you hypothesize this event happened in. Terminus ad quiem, terminus whatever it is. And in terms of troop losses, your bottom date, your bottom number here is just over 121,000, well, almost 122,000. 121,507 is what Mediat Zona and BBC Russia have worked out as having definitely died um, as a result of hostilities of the war in Ukraine, right? This doesn't include DPR and LPR troops. So it is at least conservative from that point of view, but also quite stringent criteria. In order to qualify, you have to have the obituary or the social media statement or whatever piece of evidence that they see for a person dying has to be definitely connected to the war very overtly, and then they'll add you on. There will be missing people. There will be people who have might know that they've died, but if there's no explicit claim that they died in the war, then they can't add it to those lists. So this is a very conservative estimate. and it does fit in with our general understanding of what's been going on in the war. So I think even by their own admission, the BBC Russia and Mediazona team has said, I think on the last count, they were like, well, there's going to have been at least 165,000 having died. Um, so this 121,570 or whatever the number is a sorry 121,507 is indeed a very conservative number. Report death toll. The reported death toll now includes 33,100 volunteers, 18,000 recruited prisoners, 13,300 mobilized soldiers, according to the media outlet. Over 5,400 officers have also been confirmed to have been killed. Um, uh, Ukraine's coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war said on June the 12th that more than 100,000 Russian families had contacted a Ukrainian-run initiative in search of information about missing Russian soldiers. Um, and yeah, so I don't think it gives us a number of this time round of what they think is the estimation of actual dead, but it'll be somewhere probably around the 200,000 mark, maybe just below that from Mediatzone and BBC Russia. So that is a huge number for Russia to have lost, to have had killed. When we look at a million, let's broadly say that's a million people. 200,000 is a 4-to-1 wounded, uh, wounded POW deserted, wounded to killed in action ratio, which is pretty standard, I would have thought, for a war. Some would say that actually the wounded to killed ratio of Russians is worse than that. We've seen varying analyses that say, well, actually, because the wounded often get converted into dead because they are not picked up enough. The medical evacuations aren't good enough, or the medical assistance isn't good enough. Not enough tourniquets, all that kind of stuff that the Ukrainians suffer with, but it's worse for the Russians. So they have a worse wounded to dead ratio. That would then shift our understanding of these figures somewhat. Um, but anyway, interesting data point there from BBC Russia and Mediazona. Then we have this fascinating. So Zelenskyy came out with some claims yesterday. Now, assuming these claims are absolutely true, and of course, that might be a problem for some people. Uh, these make for interesting reading, right? So President Zelenskyy of Ukraine just made an interesting statement, says Trent Telenko. Many people have done an analysis of this. Quote, let me give an example from yesterday. Roughly like this, said Zelenskyy. The Russians suffer about 1,000 losses per day. That's 500 killed and 500 wounded. In other words, that's a 1-to-1 killed to wounded, not the potentially 4-to-1, depending on whether actually, if you've got 250,000 dead, as some people think is a pretty justifiable number, then you're talking a 3-to-1 ratio, um, rather than a 4-to-1. But Zelensky's coming out saying, well, at the moment, and of course these things can change throughout the war depending on what's going on in the war. But he's saying, look, from yesterday's figures, as an example, 1,000 casualties, 500 killed, 500 wounded, 1-to-1 ratio. Wow. I'm not even counted the 10 prisoners and so on. More precisely, 968 losses. So he's actually he qualifies this by being even more granular and detailed. So this is fascinating. So it seems like these aren't just plucked out of his posterior. These are genuine numbers. So more precisely, 968 losses for Russia, 531 killed, 428 wounded. So actually more killed than wounded, and 9 captured. We had 300. We, like the Ukrainians, had 340 losses in a day. Okay, so that's basically a 3-to-1 ratio. So wow, uh, that is we had 340 losses in one day, 18 killed. So he is claiming the Ukrainians, not only do they not have a 1-to-1 killed to wounded, or even worse than that, they have an 18 to 243 ratio and 79 missing. But even if you included those 79 as dead, then actually, as Trentelenko says, I mean, these are astonishingly different figures to the Russians. Anyway, 79 missing in action, he said. So 500 Russian KIA, this is Trentelenko now, 500 Russian KIA versus 18 Ukrainian KIA is a 29.5 to 1 ratio in favor of Ukraine. Those are just astonishingly good numbers. Total Russian casualties of 1,000 versus 340 Ukrainian is a 2.9 to 1 ratio in favor of Ukraine in terms of overall casualties, but that includes, you know, as I keep saying, dead, wounded, deserted POWs. If you assume all 79 missing Ukrainians are dead, then 500 versus 97 is a 10 to 1. That's a 5 to 1. That's not quite right. Is a 5 to 1 KIA ratio in favor of Ukraine. However, you cut it, those are post Cold War Western versus Third World military exchange ratios. Yeah, fascinating stats there um, from Ukraine, from Zelenskyy himself. So there you go. Remember, there's a difference between proportion and ratio. I think I was using ratio earlier and proportion in different contexts. So anyway, good to have those data points thrown in. So Zelenskyy, during an open press conference yesterday, also admitted to this Russian advance I did that breakthrough video on, with some Ukrainian accounts saying it was not true. That some Ukrainian accounts were saying was not true. But he pointed out that the advancing invaders do not have artillery yet, just guns, as in small arms, hoping to hold out until colleagues and weaponry arrive. Zelenskyy claimed some Russians had already been found, captured, or destroyed. In the area of the advance, Ukraine outnumbers invaders 3 to 1. He also specified, yeah, as mentioned, 968 Russian losses, 531 killed. Ukraine lost 340 soldiers a day, but only 18 died. Again, that's not verifiable, but if we believe that, that's pretty astonishing. Now, on to the counter for this supposed breakthrough. Big news, N-Strike says a Ukrainian soldier and blogger on the front line, known as Demon of Bakhmut, reports that Ukrainian forces, following successful counterattacks, have destroyed the Russian groups that had advanced in the Dobropilya sector and pushed them back. Ukraine's advance continues, which appears to be very good news. And this is being widely reported, actually. So Playfra, who was dooming the other day, said, according to my sources, the Zloty Kolodya's breakthrough is mainly composed of Russian special forces, signaling that they use the best of the best for this, just like in an all or nothing push. So it's like a DRG, but much more dangerous. Rubicon unit is doing the bulk of the job and is reportedly a pain in the ass. All I know for now, again, will update you guys if I learn anything else. So he's saying that these are really good Russian soldiers, but it seems like they have genuinely been pushed back. So Tatargami said multiple Russian internet sources, so coming from Russian sources and pro-Russian Telegram channels, report that the corridor from the penetration near Dobropilya is being contained, and even claim it's being cut off as a result of Ukrainian counteractions. I cannot verify this information, but there are POW videos, and it would be relatively easy to cut this off, right? If you have enough forces to use there. So talking about POW videos, here a source cloud says the first captured invaders from the Russian 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigade are reported to have been captured in the Pokrovsk direction in the area of their breakthrough. In general, it's reported that the direction is being stabilized and there are successful counter-attacks. So there is that and some videos to support that. Julian Rupke, the journalist for the Bild newspaper in Germany with his own sources, says, I can confirm that Azov forces are doing everything possible to cut off the Russian breach north of Pokrovsk as we speak. I cannot reveal from which side they are attacking, but I can confirm that different branches of arms are involved. And other people saying, that actually it's already been um, revealed it in other sources, so I cannot reveal. Well, AMK mapping is quite a useful mapper. It says the 12th Azov Brigade, First Corps of the National Guard of Ukraine, NGU, has been redeployed to the Novyi Donbass Steppe Rubizhna line in an attempt to contain the chaotic situation east of Dobropilya, and they are attacking from that westerly direction. If they, if we can take that as gospel there. So Zelenskyy said Russia is redeploying. So essentially, the news is looking good for the counterattacks, as you would expect if the Russians were, as of yet, unable to get their exploitation forces into that breakthrough, scare quotes, breakthrough, where they just had very few sort of DRG people or SOF, special forces people, getting through. It should be easy to contain if the Ukrainians were on it, and it was really important that they were on it. And let's hope that that is indeed what has happened. Now, it'll then be interesting to see what Russia's response is. Do they then throw in masses of forces into that area? So Zelensky said that Russia is redeploying 30,000 troops from Sumy Oblast to three directions. So it looks like the Russians maybe are giving up on that Sumy attack. They've been pushed back. They've lost another village there to Alexandrivka. No, yeah, Oleksivka. Well, anyway, the village on the right hand side, yeah, Andriivka and then Kindrativka. The one on the right hand side has now been liberated by the Ukrainians, I believe, and so the Russians may be putting troops out of there and sending them elsewhere along the front. Russia's preparing for September offensive operations across three Ukrainian front sectors, moving its strongest brigades and 30,000 personnel from the unsuccessful Sumy direction. I guess the question is, will that include North Koreans? Sort of golden question, that one. A Ukrainian officer and military analyst called Sazonov has said Russia is preparing for a major offensive in the coming months, moving troops, ammunition, and equipment to Donetsk and the Pokrovsk area, including from Crimea and the Zaporizhia front. So Sumy, Crimea, Zaporizhia troops being pulled into Pokrovsk. Um, he warns any current talks could be a cover up for the build up. And that is worth thinking about. Now, I said how the Russians were predominantly using these troops with thermal blankets on. And I said that even though there's plenty of videos like this one showing these Russians getting taken out by drones, the thermal blanket's not working, probably because it's in the middle of the daytime. There is also evidence of thermal imagery and night vision drones taking these guys out too. But they are also getting through. And the self-evident truth of that is the breakthrough in the Dobropilya area, where they have predominantly done that on foot using this sort of approach. But just to let you know that there are plenty of videos out there of the Russians trying to move in this fashion and them getting picked off. So you're obviously going to see the successful ones. You aren't going to see the unsuccessful ones because no one's seeing them, right? Here we have night vision of people without thermal blankets. So this is a destruction of an entire platoon of Putin's infantry in the Pokrovsk direction. Combat work by the 3rd Assault Brigade, the Spartans. It looks the NGU, the National Guards unit here. They are obviously, well, I presume this is something to do with cross direction, could be any number of places. I presume it's got something to do with the counterattacks that are taking place there, and videos starting to come out of units being taken out by Ukrainian um, efforts there. And I was wondering whether the Ukrainians would bring in, as I advised yesterday, as I advised like I'm a military advisor, whatever, wonder whether they'd be using aviation. And there are some videos coming out. There are some videos of aviation being used up north. I could show you a number of different ones, but I don't know where this is happening. But I just find it interesting that the MiG-29 crew here using 4 GBU-39 guided glide bombs destroyed dugouts where enemy assault groups were accumulating for subsequent assault on our positions. Now, I don't know where that is, but this is, I think, a good use of aviation. And, it requires you having enough planes, enough bombs to just use them quite liberally on Russian positions in a way that the Russians did to the Ukrainians when they took Avdiivka. And it was mainly as a result of the overwhelming use of guided glide bombs that the Russians had that success they did. I think the Ukrainians need to, I think this is one of their key weapons now. Honestly, I think they need more planes and more guided glide bombs. If they can do this, which they can clearly do this, right? They clearly have the ability to get into the right positions in the air to drop these bombs. and they've done enough attrition of enemy air defense, DEAD and SEAD work. They've done enough of that to hopefully make sure that these planes are safe where they are releasing their bombs, so they can do it. So you just need to scale it. You just need the scale. You need the guided glide bombs, and you need the airplanes and the pilots, and then they can start making a significant impact on Russian positions and personnel and attacks. Honestly, I think this is super important, and I want to see way, 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 way more of that. Now, as I said, there are some claims like this one from Visioner, big news. I mean, I don't know, take it with a pinch of salt. Ukraine's Third Army Corps has begun eliminating the salient created by the occupiers near Liman. So this is a place called Ridikub, where they are counterattacking. They've had some success recently. I don't know if this is just very localized, or because it sounds like a big sort of claim here, but you know, we don't know whether that's more widespread than just a small gain outside or in the village of Rudikub. But anyway, Ukrainians pushing back there as well. Um, and and then we're going to go on to look at this video. This is a video of Ukrainians, and not for the first time we've seen this, but Ukrainians manually throwing TM62 anti-tank mines, I presume with fuses that have been adapted, as in normally these mines will go on a track or whatever, a road, tank drives over it, that pressure blows up the mine. That pressure is not going to be triggering the mine when you're just lobbing it into a dugout. So they will change the fuses, but this is in the Vovchansk area, and Russian bunkers there being attacked by Ukrainians throwing these pretty heavy sort of 10-kilogram mines into the dugouts, but those mines can do quite some damage. So that would be a good way of, if you can get close enough, that's a very good way of clearing out a mine. Rather than go in there, hand-to-hand combat, you're gonna lose troops doing that. It's just insane. You could throw some grenades in. Grenades are really relatively minor when you've got dugouts that go around the corners and do all this. Really, a mine will collapse a dugout like that. I'm pretty sure. So that seems to be a pretty good way of going about business there. Now we are hearing from the SBU head Malyuk. He's a guy that's been behind a lot of these very successful, particularly Operation Spiderweb attempts on, well, these operations behind, well, not just behind enemy lines, behind the borders. He gives some more information about Operation Spiderweb. We're also going to hear him talk a little bit about Crimean Bridge a bit later in this video. But anyway, here he says Operation Spiderweb was planned for May the 9th, but the Russian truck drivers from which the drones were launched drunk on Easter. Because of this, the special operation was postponed for a month. So drinking Russians postponed the operation. For the special operation Spiderweb, the SBU created a fake logistics company in Chelyabinsk, renting an office and warehouses right under the nose of the local FSB department. New details about the special operation are whoever made the houses for launching drones from trucks did not know why he was doing them to maintain the secrecy of the operation. Unique FPV drones of our own design were used, which had a special communication system and a combat charge. President Zelenskyy was always in touch. Fully autonomous hunting lodges with batteries were made, which continuously powered the drones because the special operation could take place in the cold season. It received the name Spiderweb at the planning stage when the head of the SBU and his colleague drew logistical connections to enemy airfields on a notebook. So a bit of detail coming out about that. Now, sadly, we hear of continued human safari activity going on. Russia continues to cynically attack Ukraine's civilian population, says Gerashchenko. Today in Kherson and Donetsk regions, Russian drones targeted passenger cars and an ambulance. Unfortunately, there are killed and injured. In the Bereslav district of Kherson region, a Russian drone struck a passenger car. One person was killed. A woman was injured. In addition, the strike on an ambulance caused a fire, which firefighters managed to extinguish. In Donetsk, a Russian drone hit a passenger car with 3 people inside. 2 men were pulled out by police, and a third was freed by rescuers and handed over to medics. So that's the sort of thing that the Russians continually are doing. And then we're going to go on to distance strikes. We're going to start with the infographic as per normal. 51 drones and missiles, 2 ballistic missiles were sent in, and indeed both ballistic missiles Iskander M or KN-23. They don't know which, but both those are shot down, which is quite very good. But apparently, as Tim White says, I think it's the first time in Iskander M has been stopped in Poltava region. Now, I wonder whether you have got a new Patriot system that has been brought to bear in the Poltava region. Poltava has been often targeted. I don't know what's in Poltava region, probably an airbase or something. But this has been targeted a number of times, and now they are able to take out an Iskander M there, so something's changed. Good news for Ukrainians. 32 out of the 49 drones were intercepted at 65%. Not great as an interception rate, but it does depend how close to the front line they are utilizing those drones. And really, that's all I know for strikes from Russia into Ukraine, and the rest is about Ukraine into Russia. We're going to start with hashtag Russia on fire. As this is Moscow, it's probably nothing to do with a strike, but I'll include it here just because. A local government building is on fire in Moscow region this morning. This is in Shlyolkovo, about 35 kilometers northeast of downtown Moscow. There was no drone warning, but there is a nice target Z on the council HQ, which started smoking. So there's a massive George ribbon. Is it St. George's ribbon? There with a huge Z on the front of the building. So that's on fire. Yeah. And then we go on to verifiable strikes. So the first one we're going to talk about is the most major one. Unetcha in Bryansk region has been hit. Now, this is an oil pumping station and part of the Druzhba pipeline. It's important oil transportation hub in Russia, through which oil passes via the Druzhba pipeline. And this has been struck. The Druzhba pipeline, in one way or another, was struck. Was it last night, night before? I can't remember. So, as in the not last night, but the last night before last night, or 3 nights ago. You get what I'm saying. So last night, says Tim White, I posted about Ukraine's attack in Bryansk. Ukrainian intelligence has now admitted the attack has been on the important Transneft Druzhba oil pumping station at Unetcha. It provides oil transportation simultaneously for 2 oil pipelines with a capacity to pump 60 million tons annually. So this is really, really important for oil logistics here. Tendar explains the Russian part of the Druzhba pipeline was attacked last night. The target was the hub and pump station near the city of Vysokoye in Bryansk region. So you got Bryansk, then Kursk, and then Belgorod. This is much closer to Belarus. In fact, the pipeline ends up going through Belarus, and it's been hit over there. So a number of these stations have been hit before. I think this other one there might have been hit just the other day or night, as I was saying. But anyway, Russian media report that a fire has broken out at the Unetcha linear production dispatch station in Bryansk region, the largest hub of the Druzhba oil pipeline network, one of the biggest and most powerful in the world. So that is really important. And in fact, it's on firms as well. It looks like 3 areas have been struck, as there are 3 separate fires evident on the firm's satellite imagery. What else? Drones were also spotted in Volgograd. Russian media report an attack on the Volgograd oil refinery, but the consequences are currently unknown. So there might be a second success for the Ukrainians in hitting Russian hydrocarbons infrastructure. Overall, the occupiers' defense ministry claimed the alleged downing of 46 drones, Ukrainian drones, overnight. So the Russians claim they shot down 46 Ukrainian drones. Drones attacked, says Euromaidan Press, refineries in Slovyansk on Kuban and Volgograd. So maybe another place in Slovyansk on Kuban, which is down in the Krasnodar Oblast, Krasnodar Krai. Russian oil refineries in 2 regions came under drone attack overnight, with debris from intercepted aircraft damaging a residential building in Volgograd. Maybe more details will emerge of potential successes there. We also know that there were some strikes taking place in Belgorod, Belgorod region. Sorry. Smoke has been seen at a couple of places where strikes have taken place. Actually, we do have an idea of what might have been hit because Cyber Broshno has done some. Oops. Yeah, great if I know what I'm doing here. Cyber has done some analysis of these um, of these potential strikes. So, in the area of the Belgorod settlement, a column of smoke was recorded near a number of enemy military facilities, namely, says Cyber Boroshno, a field airfield base, um, 357th Air Force Training Center, and an ammunition depot. So it appears to have been some targeted strikes in Belgorod. Good news there. Right, finally, well, almost finally, in this section, we are we're going to talk a little bit about how Russia is potentially having success using lasers to shoot down Ukrainian drones. Russians have claimed to have intercepted a Ukrainian long range kamikaze drone, a one way attack drone, using a combat laser from one of the mobile fire groups. Max 25 says this is probably the Chinese last combat laser. Again, the Chinese helping out the Ukrainians too much, it appears. That would be bad news if they are able to bring to bear new technology to help take out Ukrainian drones. Now we're going to hear from Maliuk about Crimea and the Crimean Bridge. He said it's a hazardous structure. Strikes it on it have become the SBU's calling card. After 3 hits, it operates, and this is interesting information here because I've wondered for a long time how operational the Crimean Bridge is. We see a lot of normal civilian traffic, holiday makers and whatnot, and cars. But actually, what else can go on it? After 3 hits, it operates in limited mode, he claims. Only trucks under 5 tons can cross, and no military logistics use it. Ukraine is advancing naval drone technology. These are no longer just kamikaze, but multi role carriers equipped with FPVs and machine guns capable of engaging enemy aircraft, which we already knew anyway, but interesting stuff there about the bridge from Maliuk. Okay, now we're moving on to other bits and pieces to finish off the video. As I reported in my geopolitical or the peace negotiation video yesterday, I'm going to do another one of them just after this. Russia is suspected of hacking US federal court filing system, breaching that filing system just days before the meeting between Trump and Putin, according to New York Times. This has been actually a years-long hack of the US federal court filing system. Now, while this is important, I mean, it includes those tied to sealed and sensitive case documents tied to national security and overseas criminal activity. Why this is important is because this should tell the Americans who the bad guys are. As I said yesterday, give me one example when Ukraine have attacked the US with cyber warfare. Give me one example where the Ukrainian state has been responsible for hacking information on and destroying infrastructure, American infrastructure and information. It hasn't happened. The Russians are doing it routinely, and here's another example of it. Don't both sides this, right? Why is it that Trump picks Zelenskyy out as the person to criticize in that 2-hour rambling, nonsensical presser and doesn't criticize Putin? Zelensky's not doing this. Putin is doing this. This is Russia's work. Why did Russia get off the hook? Just it blows my mind. So Estonia is expelling the first secretary of the Russian embassy in Estonia. The first secretary has been declared persona non grata by the Estonian Foreign Affairs Ministry, says Anton Gerashenko. Foreign Minister Margus explained that, quote, the diplomat in question has been directly and actively involved in undermining the constitutional order and legal system of Estonia, as well as dividing Estonian society, contributing to crimes against the state, including several offences related to sanctions violations. So there is that. What else? We have another falling out of a window, or we don't actually know, but it's died of unclear circumstances. Who is it? The former general of Uralkali and Avisma, Dmitry Osipov. So another kind of important person in the commercial world. Avisma is the world's largest titanium producer, while Uralkali produces mineral fertilizers, and he has suddenly ceased to exist. Right, this is what happens in dictatorships, okay? Now, for those who still think, and I'm talking to you, Mr. Trump, that the US is has given $350 billion worth of aid to Ukraine, and the Europeans need to pay more and do more. JD Vance has said this the other day. I want to punch JD Vance full in the face. To be perfectly frank, I completely dislike the man, but he's also lying. And that's partly why I dislike him. Right, European aid to Ukraine will soon hit 3 times what the US has supplied. Why doesn't Trump know this? Of course, we know that he's not getting corrected at all at the moment. He keeps talking about reducing the price of prescription drugs by 1,500%. Everyone's taking a piss out of him for that because it doesn't make any sense. That means he'll be paying people to take drugs. But he keeps saying it. He literally keeps saying it over and over. So no one corrects him when he says nuts things. Then we're hearing from the Financial Times that he has no Ukraine-Russia experts in his administration. There's no one around him that is. I wonder if I've got that here. I was going to talk about this in my next video, but it is absolutely staggering. It's a Financial Times piece that's saying essentially that he doesn't have any experts in his administration to advise him on Russia and Ukraine. And you're thinking, how can this be? That's absolutely insane. So here's one of the ones I was talking about. So Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says, a quote from the article, "It's safe to say that Trump does not have a single policy-making person who knows Russia and Ukraine advising him," says Eric Rubin, a former career diplomat who served as US ambassador to Bulgaria during Trump's first term. There is this massive lack of granular knowledge, and this is what I keep talking about. I keep telling you that Trump doesn't know anything. James O'Brien was saying yesterday on LBC that I bet Trump can't name a single city in Ukraine outside of Kiev type thing. I said this the other day. He won't know any of the regions they're talking about. He doesn't have the knowledge, and he doesn't have the knowledge around him either. So when he's making these claims about $350 billion worth of kit or aid that the US has given to Ukraine, he's not being corrected because either people don't like correcting him because they're afraid to correct him, or they just the people think the same thing as Vance keeps coming up with this, right? And so he clearly either doesn't know or is purposefully disinforming people. But yeah, so as Jane Kiev says, meanwhile, Trump continues a fairy tale of the US giving more in order to extort Ukraine. Jane Kiev is himself an American saying this. So Kiel Institute has updated its calculation of aid to Ukraine. Europe have given 257.4 billion allocated and planned. US 119 billion allocated and planned. Just a huge difference there. So that is like over double. The Europe has given over double what the Americans have given. That's not to denigrate the Americans here. But what I want to do is make sure that Trump is not lying to the public continually, all the time. Right. I do worry about growing authoritarianism in the US, and we're going to use Russia as an example. So I'm just going to, this is Essie Cup on CNN, making a really important point. So just to let you know, the Smithsonian Institute, so big museum in America, already has taken down a reference on their impeachment exhibition. They've taken down any reference to Trump's impeachments. Then they got in trouble for doing that, and then they put it back up, I think. But now we're hearing that they're to vet. The White House is now going to vet the Smithsonian museums to fit Trump's historical vision of reality. This is historical revisionism, which is what happens with authoritarian regimes. This is what has happened in Russia. And Essie Cup makes this point.
Okay, hold on, Arthur. Go ahead, Essie.
Just let me get a thought out. One of the first things Russia did after it invaded Ukraine illegally was have the Ministry of Culture review all the museums to make sure that they were sufficiently pro-Russian exceptionalism. It took over around 40 museums in Ukraine. It turned one museum in Mariupol, Ukraine, into the museum of Andrei Zvanov, who was Stalin's propaganda minister. This stuff happens all the time in totalitarian and authoritarian countries that want to whitewash history for the benefit of propaganda. It's not about highlighting, putting one thing in this corner versus that corner. It's the difference between history and propaganda. And museums should not be in the business.
So should we wipe out Columbus?
Propaganda.
Congressman.
Okay.
And of course, the Republicans there will push back on that. But absolutely, you've got a growing authoritarianism happening. And just talking about JD Vance, he's just come to the UK to stay at £11,000 a night, a week, I don't know, Chevening House, whatever, in the Cotswolds. No, Chevening's in Kent, so he's staying in this Cotswolds place. Now, interestingly, this is the billboards in Cheltenham are showing like the Vance meme. That he had a banner as he was trying to drive through. That was in Chevening. There's a truck that's going on with three sides of a digital billboard on this truck of the meme of JD Vance driving around a place that he's staying. So there's a lot of trolling going on. But I just wanted to actually, that's not what I'm going to talk to you about. This is super worrying because this is in the UK, right? And this is kind of like Stasi, KGB type stuff. So the police are asking local Cotswolds residents for their social media handles to be passed on to JD Vance's security detail. Glad to hear some people refused. Honestly, the nerve of it, especially for the man who criticised Europe for its censorship. Wow. So this is Yahoo News. We asked the police knocking on doors if they were protecting us or Vance. They were honest and said it is for him. So the British police are going knocking on doors around where JD Vance is saying, we need to know who's living here. We need names and we need your social media handles. Quote, we have had the police knocking on every door, said a dog walker and resident of Dean as a helicopter buzzed overhead. Quote, they wanted the names of everybody living there and details of their social media. I know several people refused. We asked them if they were protecting us or Vance. At least they were honest and said it was for him and that it will be all passed on to the American security people. How freaking dare American security come over to our country and take our details for their own security? I think that's disgusting, but there you go. That wouldn't, like the British wouldn't do that if they went over to the US. Yeah, the gall of JD Vance and the authority. And if you want an authoritarian nation, kind of this is what it might look like, because this is what's happened in Donetsk in Ukraine that is now occupied by the Russians. Donetsk city, after 11 years of occupation, filthy Russians, says Zelenskyy. So he's being very. By the way, I met someone. I'm on holiday, as you know. I met someone who works indirectly for British Airways in IT. He gets like 3 flights for his family, like 6 flights a year or something like that. I know. Anyway, he's got an experience of going all over the world, and he was telling me about Thailand and UAE and the Russian influence there, and he was absolutely critical of Russians, like from an sort of objective point of view of having experienced them and I've experienced them. They had we went to Turkey like 4 years ago on holiday, and they had a really bad rep in Turkey. Like loads of people were like, there was a lot of anti-Russian sentiment from other holiday makers because they were just really rude. And I don't like to tar people with the same brush, and I was saying this to him yesterday, but it just seems like they routinely have really lots of, like, the British aren't brilliant, right? But it depends, who and where and what. But as holiday makers, but the Russians, my goodness. He was absolutely excoriating them and saying in UAE absolutely terrible, and then it's all about channeling money, isn't it? Both in the UAE probably and Thailand as well, and Turkey, 400,000 I think dollars expenditure in Turkey. You get a passport, I think, and so it's a great place for Russians to funnel money and get dual citizenship, I guess. The Russian world is, anyway, going back to Donetsk. Here we have, that's just a random aside. Here we have a reservoir, 11 years of occupation, and the Russian world is going to turn this fertile, resource-rich land into a desert. And there you go. And that's been going on for some time. Sorry, knocking at the door there because I've been summoned to play pool volleyball. I can't stand, so it has to be at a pool. So talking about the lack of water, this is Donetsk again. This is what we routinely see on a daily basis, queuing up for water. This is Russian occupation. So, be warned if this is what you are moving towards, some kind of authoritarianism that doesn't really care for the welfare of its people. Anyway, that's enough for me. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.